Welcome to the first of hopefully many episodes of a podcast that right now doesn't have a set name. We're just going to talk. We have a specific topic we're going to talk about. But let's go with the nameless topic, episode 1. My name is Harvey Laguerre. I am host of Men of the Prize, the podcast, and a member of I Did Not Make These Rankings podcast network. And I am joined by my co-host. Tell them who you are, sir.
Hey, what's up, everybody? My name's Josh. Sometimes also J Time. I'm also a member of the I Did Not Make These Rankings podcast network with Harvey. And I am one of the hosts of Toontastic Journeys podcast. And I am also a co host of Mass Debaters Bracket Review Show.
That's so cool. So we are part of this network and we love podcasting. We talk about a lot of things and we have a very diverse group of people in this network. Obviously, if you're watching this, we're two black men, but we have Caucasian people, whatever, in our group. And while we were talking, we got into something that us black men or black people in general can really identify with. We came up with this, started talking about being referred to as an Oreo. Now, if you've had the cookie, you know what an Oreo is. It's those chocolate cookies, the black chocolate cookies with the white cream inside. So the best way to describe that is when you refer to a black person as an Oreo, black on the outside, white on the inside. So maybe how we speak, how we communicate, it doesn't sound black, that type of thing. And it was actually Josh, it was you that you think you said it first. And I'm like, it really hit me because I've grown up feeling that way. I was always referred to that way because I don't know, I don't sound urban black or whatever. I don't sound black. I sound educated, and apparently those are two different things.
Mm.
And I'm like, I think we should do something with it. What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Um, because our group is so diverse, often we do have these conversations that can get very serious. And, just going over my experiences growing up. Growing up, going to a predominantly white school when I was in elementary school, and then changing over to a predominantly black school, it was quite the experience. And just like you said, I found myself often because of the fact that I spoke proper, I didn't speak with a lot of slang, just because that's how I was raised. Um, I was made fun of often by the black kids. And it was because why don't you talk black? Why you talk like a white person? And most of my life, I experienced this pull where I didn't quite connect with our culture. I didn't quite connect with black culture. But being a black man, I still dealt with racism and didn't connect with other cultures. And so kind of felt like a man floating on an island by myself for a lot of my life. And just kind of going over that experience, I remember you reaching out to me and being like, hey, my experience growing up in suburbia, very similar to yours. We should get together. We should talk about this. Um, yeah, and that's kind of how we end up here. I remember specifically having a group chat with me, you, and two other members of the network who are African American, and the four of us just going over our experiences as black men, not always fitting into black culture and what it meant to be black. And it was cathartic for me. It was like, man, I'm not alone. And even though I feel like I've made strides in dealing with this, it was very nice to know, hey, other people have gone through similar things. And I think that's why it's great that we're doing this, that we're talking about this, because I'm hoping other people that have gone through this will hear this. And it will be something that'll give them some catharsis as well.
And it's something that I have yet to meet a black person who has not felt something like this, some situation, some moment. And to me, it's like these moments when you're reminded that you can, no matter, we're black, and there isn't levels to black. I'm not more black than you. You're not more black than me. But there are moments when you are reminded of your race, whether you are overtly or subtly black or something, and these situations come about. So I'll tell you. So when you said it, what came to mind, and I don't think I've said this to you, but I used to work at a movie at a movie store called Suncoast Motion Picture in malls way back, and because I'm a movie and music head and I love that stuff.
Hmm.
And one day, this is when DVDs were still a thing, or even cassettes occasionally, VHS cassettes. Some guy calls in and he's looking for a movie or a video or something, and he wants to purchase. He wants to know if we have it in stock. So I don't remember what it was. I look. I'm like, we have it, and he's like, oh, thank you so much. What's your name? I'm like, I'll hold it for you. My name is Harvey. Just come when you come in. Blah blah blah, and I'll have it for you. So the guy came in and he comes into the store and he goes to the register. I don't know, maybe I'm walking around, maybe I'm on the register. And he's like, hey, is Harvey here? I had spoken with him. I'm like, yeah, hi, I'm Harvey. I spoke to you. And the look, by the way, he's white, if that helps. The look was like, you're Harvey? You're the guy I spoke to? The utter shock that, and it was weird. But it was weird, but you know what? I also knew exactly what that look meant. I
Oh
knew
yeah.
exactly what he was thinking. That's the guy I spoke to. And that wasn't even the first time that happened. It
Hmm.
was one of many, but that's the first thing that popped into my mind. And I wish I remember the name of the movie, but I'm like, oh yeah, that's me. Hi, Harvey, nice to meet you, blah, blah, blah. And I could feel the tension. So I tried to just cut through it and move on. I gave him the movie. He looked at it, yeah, bye. He bought it and whatever. But he left like he was shocked. He was so surprised. And that's just one of many ways that the whole Oreo thing comes about. That I didn't sound black, but more importantly, this idea that blackness and intelligence aren't the same thing. It's not possible to sound intelligent and be black. If I sound intelligent, I'm trying to be white, which is absolutely ridiculous. And I think the best way maybe to start this conversation is to kind of just talk about blackness. Where have you learned, aside from your growing up, your parents, maybe family and stuff like that? Can you think of anything else? Where have you seen what it means to be black, and how has it been expressed to you?
I mean, outside of my family, growing up in the culture that we grew up in here, I'm from Portland, Oregon, and Portland, Oregon is not a very diverse city. However, they do have here a pretty good population of African Americans. Um, and outside of that, it was media. It was media depictions, and it's not always the best depictions. It was things like Boys in the Hood. It was things growing up like watching Fresh Prince of Bel Air or watching The Cosby Show. It's these depictions of African Americans on TV and in film that I saw, and I was like, okay, that's what being black is. That's what being cool black is. Because I mean, it's a weird thing to even think about. What does it mean to be black? What is blackness? And it's not just your skin color. I mean, that's big, huge part of it, of course, but there's more to that. Especially what it means to be black in America, because the American experience as a black man is very different than the experience you would have maybe in like Ethiopia or somewhere else. So for me, it was seeing, the gangsters, it was seeing people speak with urban slang. It was seeing um black people rally together, having each other's backs. It was seeing our culture, and it was the stereotypes, the jokes, but also the realities of racism, of being in the store and being followed around, and then seeing that depicted on the screen, and seeing it depicted both seriously and comedically. And so growing up, for me especially, because my mom really didn't want me to have to deal with as a young child the truth of racist America. She kept a lot of that from me. I knew about slavery, I knew about civil rights, but we didn't really have the talk about, hey, when you go to a store you might be treated different. It was later, as I experienced those things, that I realized those were things. But for me growing up, they weren't something that I expected. And so, yeah, to answer the question, a lot of my experiences of what it meant to be black was from other black people that I saw out and about. And I did try to eventually emulate that. I wanted to fit in. So I started talking with more slang. I got really good at code switching, as they call it, switching from one language, my white voice, you know,
Right.
the proper the proper English, to using slang and trying to sound gangster or trying to sound urban. And I remember I had similar situations as you did, where I would be on the phone. I worked for call centers for about 15 years, and I remember my friends used to laugh because they're like, man, your call center voice is so white sounding. I'm like, well, I mean, it's call center, it's work. You guys sound professional on the phone. I'm not going to pick up the phone sounding unprofessional. And it reminds me of that movie. I don't know if you've seen it, called Thank You for Calling. Um, it's kind
Started
of a
watching. I did finish it, but I know what you mean. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's a little bit satire, but the guy, he has a situation that's similar where he's really good at speaking like that. But I remember one time I was hanging out with some friends, and they weren't black friends. They weren't white either, but they're used to me being my normal self. However, one of my really good friends had called me, who, when I was around that friend, I usually spoke with slang and urban vernacular, and so he called him like, what up, da, 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 and I'm using the N word, and I'm just going off, and I get off the phone, I turn around, and both of them are just staring at me, wide eyed. And then they started around like, "Oh my gosh, Josh, you can't talk like that. Don't scare us, man. You're gonna bust a cap in our ass," And I'm like, and I kind of laughed it off. I was like, whatever. But inside I was like, dang, man. I'm like, do I really sound that different? So it's kind of weird for me being split in those two roads like that. Um, anyways, I know I kind of went off on a tangent,
No, that's the
but
point. It's conversation. No, and I agree. For me, when I think about it, for me, the fact that there isn't and if there is one, maybe I don't know. I don't feel like there's a definition for whiteness, but I feel like there's something for blackness. So it when I'm black, so for me to be black, I need to listen to hip hop. I
right.
need to, I'm if I'm a black male, I'm immediately a threat.
Hmm.
I'm eventually a criminal. I don't see my kids because black fathers aren't around. There's all these things, and there it's like all a bunch, and then all most of the things stereotypes that go with being black. And since we're both men, we can speak to black men issues. But most of the stereotypes that go with being a black male are all negative, with the exception of the Mandingo one. When you're a black male, we have a bigger penis, we're amazing, sex and whatever, all that stuff. But everything else is crappy.
Hmm.
And it occurs to me that the fact that I have to define myself as black, and am I black enough? Like there's this graph of blackness, zero blackness here to 100% there, which is crap because black is not it's we're not defining how I speak. We're not defining my education. We're just defining literally the color of my skin. But we've added on to it. Now it's culture. Now it's how I sound like, what I listen to, who I talk to, who I don't talk to, what I do, all these things. Blackness is this whole separate entity. And it's incredibly annoying. I'm just Harvey. I just happen to be black or I happen to be Haitian. And what I found is that we deal with a lot of stereotypes from whites and whatever. And I feel like at times the only people who are more racist to black people are black. That's the hardest thing. It's bad enough when I'm not black enough because you have white friends and you're the one who can dance or you're the one who can play basketball. You're the one who gets
Right. Right.
chosen in gym because
Right.
you're automatically the athlete type of thing. I suck at basketball, so I got chosen, and then after I missed that third j, they're like, dude, what the hell, man, aren't you like a natural athlete? No, I'm not a natural athlete. Just because
Hmm.
I'm black doesn't mean I am, that type of thing. And there's so many of these stereotypes that I don't fit into, but I got it from white people. But when I heard it from people who look like me, it was even worse. Why are you talking white? Why don't you listen before I got into hip hop? Why don't you listen up? Why are you listening to rock and whatever and stuff
Right.
like that? And when I was young, it was really annoying because I'm like, oh, I don't know. Am I not black enough? What's going on? I'm an adult now. I'm like, None of that has anything to do with how black I am. None of it. Music, we created all of it. So if I listen to rock, I'm just as black because we created black and jazz and blues and all
Oh
that
no.
stuff. So it don't make sense. So none of that made sense. Sports, we come in, we dominate, we do whatever. But just because I'm black doesn't mean my jumper is better than yours or that I can run with the football, that I'm faster than you, all these things. It's it was more hurtful when it came from people who look like me when I heard it, because that means that they got indoctrinated. They believe this thing. This is what it means to be black. And that's the absolute worst thing. That's the worst way for us to look at being black. We're humans. We're just trying to be equal. I'm not better than anybody else. I just want to be treated the best as everyone gets treated. And the fact that I got to fight that by getting past the fact that I'm black, so I got to get past the purse being clutched when I walk by, or the car being locked when I walk by, or a store when they see I'm Harvey. Like, what Harvey? Harvey is not a black name either. Like, all this crap that I got to fight through just to get to be a regular person is a battle. So that's what I think. A lot of this would be talking, and there's layers to this. Being black, that's one thing. What does it mean to be black? Does it mean, is it just the color? Is it our experience? Do I have a different experience than white people or Hispanic people or Europeans or whatever? Or can I just be a person who just happens to be black? Are we ever going to get to that point? Do you ever see a time where we would get past that, where being black isn't like the first thing you talk about?
I would love to say that we'll get to that point, but in the society we live in today, where it seems that more and more we are forced to be divided, by race, by sex, by politics, religion, spirituality, whatever you want to call it. There's all kinds of these things that we're split. And instead of celebrating these things, oftentimes it's putting us against each other. And, like you mentioned with your experience, being a black person that doesn't necessarily fit in the mold of what popular culture says being black is, was tough because on one side, like you said, you're dealing with the racism. You're dealing with people assuming you can play basketball and then giving you crap because, dude, you can't play basketball. Oh, you should be able to dance. You're black. Well, guess what? I'm not a good dancer. Like you don't listen to hip hop. You don't listen to R&B. You don't know who this R&B person is. I'm like, no, dude. I grew up with one R&B station that my grandparents listened to that was old people's music that I didn't like, and the rest was pop. It wasn't until I was in middle school that we got a hip hop station. So I didn't listen to that. I listened to rock and roll. And like you said, we created that. But I got so much crap because, man, why you listen to that white people music? You
Yo, I
know,
don't want to cut you off, but I want to say this now. And as I'm talking about this, as you're talking about it, I am as guilty of this as any other person. And I just want to put that out there. And I'm going to say it to you. For a while, every Tuesday, we would do our drafts
hmm
for our network. And I think I was the one that picked, 90s R&B as what we picked the best 90s R&B song. So we
I
in our
remember
draft,
that.
yeah. And just to give you an idea, so what you do, you pick the best of whatever subject, and when somebody picks it, you can't use it, and then we put the list out, and then people vote for it. And I remember when I put it out there, and then you were talking about how you didn't listen to a lot of this R&B, and I'm like, what do you mean you didn't listen to 90s R&B, brother? And I'm like, what do you mean? In my head, I'm like, N-word, what do you mean? You don't know Tevin? You don't know blah blah blah. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, I'm as guilty as any, and that's terrible. And it's like, and it doesn't make sense. And it doesn't matter. Because honestly, I'm an 80s person. I love the 80s. I love the 80s. And it wasn't until like 86, 87 that I got into like R&B and stuff. Because early 80s, I was Hall and Oates. I was Def Leppard. I was White Snake. I was Bon Jovi. I was Billy Joel. I was as anti-black as you can get. So for me to even think that when I was talking to you, I'm like, that's just stupid, because I was embarrassed for the music that I like to listen to. I wouldn't listen to it publicly because I didn't want black people to be like, oh my God, what is that? That's not Bobby Brown. That's not New Edition. I'm not listening to the right stuff. So I just wanted to say and I never said it to you. I apologize just because I'm like, that's embarrassing to think that. But it's almost an automatic thing. It's almost this expectation that we almost kind of grade you on your level of blackness by what you like and what you don't like. And that has no bearing at all on the kind of man that you are. So I didn't want to cut you off, but I wanted to put that out there so that you understood. My bad on that, because that was stupid.
Hey,
Dumb as hell,
it's
bro.
all good. I appreciate your apology, man. But you know, what, honestly, I took it in stride. I've been dealing with that all my life. I
Right.
mean, it was funny because I was like, man, I'm gonna do terrible. And I think I got like the third most votes.
You got more
Uh,
votes than me, which made no damn sense. I was all
well, you
mad,
know
like,
what? As I went online, I started doing my research. I'm like, oh, I do know a lot of these songs. I know a lot more of these songs than I realized I know. It's not that I didn't know them; it's just I didn't listen to them a lot.
right.
And you know, I think the way I dealt with having this pool of like, because I grew up, man, the way I grew up, I just kind of did my own thing for a long, long time. You know, I grew up listening to 80s music because my mom was younger when she had me. She loved 80s music. She introduced me to it. You know, Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch, Janet Jackson, Rhythm Nation. You know, I had the Vanilla Ice cassette tape. I wore that thing out, you know. And then when I got older, I listened to pop. You know, like I was a big Spice Girls fan. I was into like Alanis Morissette, Jewel, Smash Mouth. But then, like, I got into wrestling, and people used to laugh because, like, my cassette tape, or not my cassette tape, but my CD case, all it was WWE music albums.
Mhm.
Like, I didn't own any other music except for that. And that's mostly what I listened to. And then I got into rock, and I just went through these phases, but I eventually reached a point where I just lived a split life. Like, if I was with certain friends, you know, I was more myself, you know, and that was listen to rock. That was listen to like Linkin Park, listen to Saliva, Creed. Used to love me some Creed. You know, I dressed in Jinko jeans, and I used to get made fun of it because they're like, you know what that stands for? Jeans N words can't own. And I'm like, well, I own them, so what's
Mhm.
that mean? You
Right.
know. Um, but when I was with my other friends that were more urban, for lack of a better term, that were more black. You know, we listed hip hop, we listed G Unit, and you know, we went to the club, and you know, we acted a fool. The N word was said all over the place for any old reason. You know, and we perpetrated a lot of the stereotypes. I mean, we was out there smoking blunts and trying to get at the girls and stuff, and so I just kind of had this duality, and so I'm really able to kind of switch back and forth. But me, you know, especially when I was younger, I just kind of was like, okay, I'm gonna do my own thing. I like this anime show. I'm gonna start watching it. This was before anime became kind of cool, and it's before it was really adopted by the culture where it is now, where like my friends that were a little bit more on the black side of things, I didn't tell them I watched anime. And the ones that knew, they used to give me crap about it. They're like, man, you watch some cartoons, man. Yeah. uh so, you know, there's a lot of those situations where I was like, okay, this is my thing for these group of people. And then here's my thing for the other group of people. But you know, growing up, most of my friends were white. A lot of my really close friends to this day still are. You know, not that I don't have close black friends, but I do. But because I do, but a lot of them were white. And it wasn't because, oh, I feel intimidated, I feel like I don't fit in. It was just those were the people that accepted me for who I was at the time. And those are the people to this day I still roll with because hey, look, at the end of the day, I don't care what you sound like. I don't care what you look like. You know, yes, it's part of you, and those differences should be celebrated. However, the negativity and the stereotypes that come from that shouldn't be. You know, and there's lots of stuff about black culture that I grew up with that I did do and that I still do to this day. You know, my kid gives me a lot of crap because to this day, if I'm watching a show that's a competition show, it could be a cooking show, it could be a game show, and there's a black person on there, I'm like, all right, brother, man, let's go. You know, I'm rooting for the black. He's like, why are you always rooting for the black person? I'm like, cuz, man, them are people. We got root from, you know.
Right. Mhm.
Or if I see another black person on the street, I acknowledge them, especially from somewhere where there's not a lot of us.
Right.
You know, I remember my ex one time, I lived all the way out in Beaverton, which is a suburb area of Portland. And it's not very diverse. A lot of white folks. And I remember we were walking around at the store, and I saw a black guy, and I kind of nodded at him, and she stopped me, and she's like, "Josh, do you like know him?" I'm like, "No." She's like, "Well, why'd you not?" I'm like, "Cause he's black." I'm like, "And I'm black, and we just that's what we do." She's like, "Oh." She's like, "I just thought you knew like every black person here, because every time we were going somewhere, you'd be nodding at them." I'm like, "Yeah, no, that's what we do, especially when we out here by
Right.
ourselves, you know." um, and so lots of those cultural things that are ingrained in me, hey, when you go out, you're representing the household. Make sure that you are represented well. Those are the positive things about blackness and black culture that I carry with me. But this negative connotation, and it's not all negative, the culture is the culture, Yeah, I'm not a sneakerhead, but if you want to be a sneakerhead, go for it. That's cool. Just don't make fun of me because I'm not a sneakerhead and I don't know the difference between that pair of Jordans and this pair of Jordans.
Mhm. You said something interesting. You were talking about a situation with your friends and how you were speaking. I had a situation with a guy who was like really good friends. And I'm similar to you in that for the longest time, the majority of my friends were white. And
Hmm.
I don't know, it was music I listened to, movies, whatever, and stuff like that. And also, kind of, I wasn't around a lot of black people up until I hit high school. But then
Hmm.
the black kids in high school were more on that urban side. And since I didn't fit that, I wasn't cool with them. The black girls weren't cool, weren't interested in me either, or whatever. But this friend of mine, white guy, who we were friends for the longest time. We lived in the same development. We hung out for years. Eventually, we both moved on, and I kind of got back into contact with him after a few years. And this is around the time that Trump is running for president.
Hmm.
And so I'm like, oh, I haven't spoken for the longest time. How you doing? Blah blah blah, whatever. And we're talking, and they're like, yo, let's meet up, let's go somewhere, let's go have lunch, let's go have let's have dinner, whatever. And, he got married, and I was at his first wedding and all that stuff. I was in his first wedding. I was in his second wedding, not his first wedding, or one of the two, either way. So we're sitting there and we're talking, and obviously back then it was almost impossible to avoid politics.
Oh yeah.
And then he was like, oh, I'm all for Trump and blah blah blah. And
Mm.
yeah. And I'm like, you know what? You can have your own political leanings and such. That's fine.
Right.
But he said something, and I don't even know how it came up in this conversation. And he was from California, and then he had moved to Jersey. This is
Okay.
where I grew up, where I know where my kids grew up before we moved to Florida. And we're sitting here talking, and he was like, "You know something? I'm more black than you are." And
Ooh.
and and I was, "What?" And you've known me, I think, long enough. I don't get upset. It's not in my
Mhm.
nature. I'm a pretty calm person. And I didn't get upset even with this. But what I did say to him is, no matter how much Tupac you listen to, because that was his boy, he loved Pac. I'm like, no matter how much hip hop you listen to, no matter what R&B you listen to, no matter what car you drive, no matter how you talk, you will never be as black as me, because you're not black at all. Blackness has absolutely nothing to do with those things. And he was saying the reason he's black because he liked Pac and he didn't like Biggie. Of course, he's Pac, he was against Biggie, and he listened to the West Coast stuff. And I listen to hip hop, but he assumed because of what he listened to, he was blacker than me, or what movies he liked, he was blacker than me. And I calmly was like, you don't even understand what it means to be black. You don't understand at
Right.
all what it means to be black. Because if you get pulled over, you're not black. If I get pulled over, I'm black. There's a definitive difference between the two. You just have a few little remnants of black culture that you like. You're not black at all. And I'm like, wow. And I'm like, and it's
Boy.
stuff like that. Like, I was like, it hit me. It surprised me because that was somebody I was friends with for a long time. And I'm like, wow, like he felt comfortable saying that to me.
Mm.
Comfortable. Like you don't have a clue what it means to be black. And I think through this podcast, through what we do, that's going to be kind of a recurring theme. We're going to talk about what it means to be black.
Yeah,
We're going to talk
absolutely.
about what it means to be white? Or is whiteness really a thing? Because
Mhm.
when people, at least for me, and I'm kind of wrapping up trying to do this. For me, when I hear somebody say you sound white, you're not saying I sound white, you're saying I sound educated. That's
Right.
the difference. That's the thing. So you're not saying I sound white. So the question is there does whiteness exist? Blackness does because we've all defined it. But I'll leave that question to you. Does whiteness really exist?
I mean, I don't think it truly exists in the same way that blackness doesn't truly exist. It's what it's been made into. I mean, you remember in the '90s, one of the big things in comedy was the skit where the comedian would go up there, be like, "Hey, man, look, white people they be driving like this. Yeah,
Right.
black
Hmm.
people drive like this.
Hmm.
White people dance like this. Black people." And I think that's where some of that started turning into that culture because if you look at black culture in the '60s, if you look at black culture in the '70s, and you look at the things that the Black Panthers were doing, this whole idea of speaking with the urban slang, you didn't see it by a lot of black people. The ones that did it were kind of on the outs of society, but you saw black folks dressing nice. You saw black folks speaking proper, more proper than some white folks spoke because they felt at that time, hey, we are already having to work 2 times harder. We are already looked down upon. So when we go out there, let's be excellent. And I think just as time changed, as gangster rap got introduced into the culture, as it became cool culturally, not just for black folks, but for all people in America, it kind of became cool to be gangster, to be black, to talk with slang, to wear Jordans, to do what the black culture is doing and follow suit. You started having this divide where it was like, hey, if you're not doing these things, are you black? And anything opposite of that, because those were the things that were black, the opposite became the things that were white. And so, hey, if you wore basic shoes because you didn't care about trying to have the nicest shoes, oh man, look at that. You're over there wearing shoes like a white person. If you dressed nice and didn't sag and you had your pants up, oh man, look at you over there dressing like Urkel or dressing like a white guy. So, I mean, I don't think being whiteness in that way exists outside of being the antithesis of blackness.
Hmm. Agreed. Agreed. All right. I think this is the beginning of a fantastic conversation. I think we're going to delve into different parts of blackness, of this whole Oreo pandemic type of thing, what it means. Is it real? What can we do to get rid of it? And get other perspectives about it because we can only speak as black men. And I think we know somebody, and hopefully she'll join us. There's got to be a whole different dynamic when you are a black woman or
Oh,
when
there's
you're
got to
mixed.
be.
There's a
Mhm.
whole different thing. And it's our interests. Why don't you like this? And you like this instead. And it makes people question what you are, who you are, and all that stuff is crap.
Mhm.
My blackness was confirmed when I was born. It
Right.
doesn't change with what you think or anybody thinks of me, whether you're black or white. So I think we're going to have a fantastic conversation. But for now, where can people find you, Josh, when we're not talking about blackness, when we just chilling, talking about regular stuff?
All right. Well, you can usually find me every Friday on the Master Bears Bracket Review Show. However, we're on a short hiatus. We should be back at it um, maybe this Friday. I'm not quite sure, but we'll be back real soon. You can also find me on Tuesday Night Drafts with the I Did Not Make This podcast or I Did Not Make These Rankings podcast network that me and Harvey are both part of. However, that's also been on hiatus.
Yeah,
Uh, but that's coming back soon.
right.
In the same way, Toontastic Journeys podcast, which you can find on Spotify, you can find on Apple Podcasts, pretty much anywhere you find podcasts, you can find it. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We are on hiatus, but we'll be back soon as well. So um, you can find me on a lot of these things in a lot of those places. Just don't expect any new content for a week or two, okay?
There you go.
Uh,
Excellent.
but other than that, I'm really excited for this topic. There's so much I want to get into: representation, dating while black. There's so many facets to this conversation. So I look forward to having them with you, and I look forward to hearing what you all have to say about it. Please sound off in the comments. Let us know what you think. Let us know if there's any topics you want to hear us cover, and also just let us know your own experiences. If you've experienced this, what your thoughts are on what it means to be black, what your thoughts are on if whiteness is a thing, if blackness is a thing, let us know.
And you can find me at my website. It's harveylaguerre.com. So HARVEYLAGUERRE.com. That's where you'll find Men of the Prize, the podcast. 3 seasons deep, talking about men's mental health. But everywhere else, the I Did Not Make These Rankings podcast network drafts on Tuesdays, which should be coming back soon. You'll find me there. My website, all my socials are there. You can find me there. Um, I like the idea of this topic because it's something that I know every person who looks like us has experienced in some form or fashion. And I think the best way to kind of deal with it is to talk about it. So, like my boy Josh said, if you have any thoughts, if you disagree with this, say it. If you agree, tell
Mhm.
us why. Tell us your situations. When did this happen? What happened? How did you deal with it? How do you deal with it now? But for now, I hope you enjoyed this introductory episode of this podcast. It's still unnamed, but hopefully, maybe this will stick. We're just talking about what it's like to be black like me. Have a good one.